Hey, folks, welcome back to the Land Fixer podcast. I am your host, as usual, Logan Swanson. Today we're talking about, you guessed it, land. We talk everything land, investing, fun things to do with land, how land smells, whatever we want to talk about. That's what we do here. Today we have an exciting guest. Everybody say hi to Clay Hepler. He's returning. You saw him 6 months ago. Say hi, Clay.
Hey, what's going on?
All right. Folks, as usual, if you need to buy or sell land, go to primelandexchange.com. I can help you out there. If you're a land flipper and you need funding, do not talk to Clay. Contact me at landpartnerfunding.com. Just kidding. You'll hear some more about that. Also, if you have land, you want to JV with somebody, whatever it might be, and you want to get in contact with me, you can reach me at thelandfixer@gmail.com. With that being said, Clay, say hi again and tell us what's been going on in the past 6 months. Why are you back here?
Well, dude, first of all, I have to ask you a question.
Yeah.
And I should ask you before we got on, but what is the land fixer from?
Well, it's actually kind of a goal. Um, the idea is I've never been great at being super specialized in any one thing. So you kind of hear about land investors who are like, I do this, I do entitlements, or I do this, or I do that. And that's my life has always been kind of like getting very good at a lot of things, kind of the jack of all trades sort of scenario. So the idea is I want someone to be able to come to me with any deal, any piece of vacant land, and say, what is the best and highest use for this property, and can you help me achieve it? And if I can't do it personally, I'll know somebody who can. So that's like I'm the fixer. You come to me with land, and I'm the fixer. What problem you have? You know, if it's a legal issue, it's an access issue, it's a probate issue, it's a development issue, it's a subdivision issue, whatever it is, I can solve
Got
it.
it.
Yep.
Got it. Yeah, that's like reminds me of like, The Sopranos. The fixer is like, go fix this
Yes.
problem, Jimmy.
Yeah, I'm actually designing an intro to the podcast where it's going to be me in a suit, like, kind of that
Let's
same.
go. That's
Yep.
awesome, dude. Yeah, well, that's super cool. That's super cool. Well, to give you a little update on what's happened for me over the last 6 months is one of the big things is the unraveling of, well, I would say not unraveling the changing and elimination of a coaching program that I have,
Hmm.
which we could talk about today. Number two, I think is a, a, a more emphasis on data and quality of just everything that we're doing.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you why that's super important and why we've been doing that more and more. And then a kind of an emphasis on building out a dispositions process, right? And really emphasizing the selling of land. I think that the dream that we've been sold for a lot of land investors that got in during the COVID, right after COVID era, was this very easy flip. And it's really interesting as you mature in the business, kind of see something that's a little different than that. I wish it wasn't,
Hmm.
but it is. And land is illiquid in a lot of markets. Now, we could say that it's quote unquote illiquid, compared to house flipping of those that have done house flips. Logan, I mean, I, I've done almost 100 house flips, right? And so, depending on the scope of work for your house flip, you might be 4 months, 5 months, so it's still a pretty long period of time that you're flipping a house. That's pretty similar to land, I'd find. But we're seeing in a lot of the markets that we're a part of that the market is just slowing, and I don't think it's a necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just regressing to the mean. Like this is what normal land sells for, unless you get a really good piece of land, like we've had probably over the last month, three pieces of land that were just solid, 277K flips and profit splits in a 55K profit flip, just solid good deals in good markets. But that doesn't feel like the narrative for a lot of our properties. So that's just kind of where I've been since we last chatted.
Yeah, so I think let's work in reverse on that. And I'll start with kind of what everybody's still talking about in the industry is like, this isn't what it was, this what isn't what we were told it would be. I can't buy cheap. I can't sell high. Things are sitting on market too long. Um, we felt this a lot in our funding company. You know, the disposition process in a funding company has to be quick and cash. And if it isn't, not only do you not make a lot of money in funding because it's all contingent on cycling through money multiple times in a year, um, but it also just causes pain and headache with the people that you're partnered with. Say someone brings you a deal. Most funding companies, myself included, will have a default period of 9 to 12 months. And if you can't sell the land in that period, you lose it, or some other structure takes place or whatever. So the longer the days on market last, the more uncomfortable the relationship is. The less we feel like buddies, the more we feel like what's going, how's this going to end? And then there's this contradictory pressure where the funder is like, hey, let's slash prices, let's sell this. It's a dirty bird. We'll just move on to the next one. But the person you're working with, that might be the one or two deals that they have. Like,
Right.
they can't wash it. They can't take a loss, or not even, if they can't break even, they have to get a profit. So, we feel that acutely in that business and our flipping side of things. Like, we're never really rushing, but we want sort of consistent, predictable sales there. And luckily with developments, you kind of structure developments and subdivisions so that they will sell. Like, so I feel like you have more control there. If you do a subdivision and they're not selling, like, you didn't do your homework, right? So all that being said, let's start with the sales side of things. Like, what are you seeing in the sales side? I'm interested to hear your perspective on how you're getting properties moved, et cetera.
Yeah, and I would echo what you just said, which is the narrative that was sold is a little bit different than where we currently are, and that's not a good or a bad thing. That's just we need to adapt and survive. If we want to have solvent businesses, then we need to adapt and survive. What that looks like is the single most important thing that we have to focus on is our cash conversion cycle, right? And so how we're focusing on this and being more aware of this in our business is we're focusing on three things. Number one, market selection. It has always been a thing, but it's becoming more and more of a thing, right? Like I told you, those three deals that we purchased and sold, dude, those are like 45-day flips when I like on the market, under contract, sell,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's just the markets that we were in. The piece of property was conducive to the market, right? It was a good property that sells quite quickly in the market, but it's conducive to the market. That's the number one thing. Number two thing is being really good at broker selection and having that internal disposition team. Like we have a disposition admin as well as a associate, which is essentially like imagine a intake person that is managing messaging, Facebook messages, primarily, and an associate's like a lead manager, right? So they're taking calls, they're qualifying sellers, or they're calling brokers and say, hey, we have this listing of properties. So I have very good people in those positions, and it's still hard for us to sell deals. And then number three is something that we've recently thought of, and even we're applying this to funding as well, is in the house wholesaling flipping business, right? You will get draws. So, you say, hey, this is my scope of work, which is I'm buying this house for $100,000, $200,000, and I need $40,000 of a scope of work, right? Depending on your relationship with the private lender, right? You can get in a little bit of an additional draw if you want to cover your interest expense, for example. Like I want the draw to cover. I don't want to have to pay this out of pocket. And depending on the type of lender, like they'll give you that interest expense, right? Your relationship with them, your credibility, your track record. There's a lot of stuff, and this is common for even banks. Banks doing this, so they'll finance your interest expense. They make more money in the long term, right? And if you're a competent borrower, it's a win-win scenario, right? And so we're doing that on the front end with our lenders, to get cash flow on the front end, a little push at the back. And we're also doing that in funding as well. Like we're giving our buyers a little kind of almost like an acquisition fee. It changes our structure a little bit, right? Because we have to hit our return profile, but we're doing that to help people with liquidity. So those are the three things that we're doing in our business to get that liquidity on the front end, right? If you're an acquisition manager, you might get paid at closing and when you pay on the buy side and when you sell. That's what we do with our
Right.
team. And so we've just applied that, Logan, to our structure.
So can you give me an example of that? That's a lot of,
Yeah,
seems
yeah,
a little
yeah, yeah, yeah,
complicated. Yeah, give
yeah,
me
yeah,
one
yeah, yeah.
example.
Yeah, so here's an example. We're buying a deal for $100,000. We think that the closing costs are going to be, 1,500 bucks, and the renovation is $5,000, right? Survey, perk test, whatever. Um, we think it's going to sell for 200,000, right? Pretty confident it's going to sell for 200,000. Um, the buyer or the fundee, or us in this case, at closing will say, hey, we want an extra $5,000, for example, right? So it's ends up being 111,500, something like that, right? And that is the basis in the property. And so that person could pull out $5,000 to keep their business running. Obviously, there's a higher leverage point on that. And the structure could change a little bit, different JV structure, however you fund your business, or like a different interest rate or whatever. But that's how it works. So that person gets that little kick at the closing, and so that they can keep their business going in the meantime.
So this is between you and someone who's coming to partner on a deal, like bring a deal and you're JVing and you're funding.
Yeah, we'll do that with that, and we also do that with our private lenders, right? With our
Okay.
private lenders, we'll say, hey, this is our intention. We want the cash to pay for example, our acquisition guy on the front end, our lead manager on the front end, things like that. We're very transparent about it. And they're fine with it. They make more money on their interest, as long as there's a good loan to value, right? You can't go to someone and say, hey, I'm buying this for 80% of market value and I want to get, 87% in kickback. It's kind of like, well, where's the profit, right?
Mhm.
This is contingent upon you finding a good enough property. But yeah, that's essentially the structure that we've been doing.
Nice. So what are the disposition channels you guys are using right now, and what are you enjoying the most or seeing the best results with? And then also circle back to broker selection and agent selection. That is hugely important in our industry, and I think it can't really be spoken of too much because people undervalue it.
I agree with that. So let me just say I'm a little bit over my skis here. Logan, you're the guy that we should be asking about this because you're the pro. But because we've recently done this, man. I mean, this is like very recent. But we're doing Facebook and we're doing land.com. And then, we're having a broker list on the MLS, and depending on the state, we'll list on the MLS too, like a flat fee listing MLS. But that's pretty much what we've been doing. Land.com just makes me like cry. I just cry every month when that bill comes due.
Hmm.
But we're just trying everything now. I mean, we have like 15 slots on land.com. We're doing Facebook. But it's very expensive. And that's how we're doing. Those are the channels that we're using currently.
Yeah, do you specialize in any areas? Because this is something that I don't know a lot of folks may not realize, but your budget that you're spending on land.com, you could probably get better results just investing in Google Ad Search or something that's really passive. If you're operating, and this kind of goes back to something I harp on a lot is, starting with the end in mind. Ideally, like really strong land companies are going to have a vision for the product that they're going to sell. Maybe it's like cabin lots or, specific off-grid properties or properties in, the Rocky Mountains or whatever it might be. Or a specific region, like, hey, we stay within, in Texas, maybe you stay around DFW or whatever, something like that. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to be really targeted with your marketing. So I know folks that are like investing in lands.com. And I think if you took the same ad spend and just judiciously applied it to a few keywords, you would probably 3, 4, 5x your lead flow. And it's actually more, it can be more powerful because they're going directly to your site. There's not this intermediary where they're going to lands.com and then they're being bumped off, or it's actually an impersonal relationship because they'll go view your listing somewhere. They won't really pay attention or see your face or your brand. And then they'll put in, they'll submit whatever the form is and they get a call from somebody or, so the emotional process is also different. Everything's a little different. And I have a listing service, and there's nothing wrong with listing services. But if you have a bigger operation or a team that can manage it, I think it's smart to think about how much you're spending elsewhere, and maybe that's something you could be more efficient with in-house.
You know what I think, guys? We should turn this around and I should just interview Logan because he's saying better things than I'm saying on this. That's amazing, man. I've never even thought about that. And we're in a lot of different markets, and
Yeah.
one of the things we'll talk about here in a second, right, is like the quality thing, and fewer higher quality properties, and filtering on the front end more and reducing our head count. Like, dude, at one point, like we were like $75,000 a month in overhead. That is that is crazy, right? And we're at about half that now.
Yeah.
And I find that like we need for our volume and what we want to do, it's kind of like we need that. But I'm trying to figure out how to get it down more.
Yeah.
And it's usually the quality thing, right? But
Hmm.
to answer your question about brokers, I basically came up with this acronym that I espouse to my team, which is the CQT method. Right. First, you go in your area, whether it's a zip code or a specific county, depending on the size of your parcel, proximity, etc. You check Zillow, Redfin, Land.com, find a Land Pro on Land.com, and you find the top land brokers in that specific area. Then Q is so you check making sure that those properties are very similar to yours. So you don't want someone that's listing a 650-acre tract to be your broker for a 10-acre tract. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, let me pause you. That is a great place to start, especially if you're talking about arbitraging an ad budget. Start with a broker who has lands.com. You don't need it. Like your property will show up there if you're working with a broker that's already paying for it. And there's a few other asks you can do there, but keep going. That's a great place to start for a reason a lot of people may not even think of.
Okay, yeah. And I'll go into why I do land.com. I'll
Hmm.
explain in a second why I kind of do it. But long story short, then we qualify the broker, right? So we get on a call with the broker, and like that's important. How responsive are they? These land brokers, sometimes they don't respond, and if they're not responding to you, a new client, what do you think they're doing to your clients in the
Right.
future? And so that dictates a lot of times, Logan, like how responsive is this person? How in detail do they know the market? Do they know sell-through rates? Do they know how many deals are selling? And sometimes you do want the old guy that's been there for 25 years and knows everyone and has a pocket buyer that they can just show the property to. Sometimes you want that. It really depends on the market. But that comes down to you really assessing what you're looking for in that specific area, as well as your property size. But you're qualifying, you're calling 3 to 4 brokers, having conversations with them. How well do they know the market? Are they a residential broker that's pretending to be a land broker? Are they a commercial broker pretending to be a land broker? Land brokers are land brokers, and you want to work with someone that understands that you got to get your feet on the ground to actually see the parcel. And so the last thing is CQT. T is for tour. I can't tell you how many properties, including a property that we're buying this week, that we didn't have a broker go out to soon enough, and ends up being we're going to sell this thing for 150. Actually, it's going to be 75.
Hmm.
Or a broker that's a good broker, a good land broker, is going to want to get their feet. They're going to always say, "I want to get my boots on the land. I want to get my feet on the land because I need to walk it. I can't give you a value until I walk it." And now that might be annoying for us millennials or Gen Z that says, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. Like you can just see it online." But these brokers have been walking pieces of land. They know how they lay. They know what the buyers in the market like, and they take their job really seriously. And so the T is vital, not only for your due diligence, right? We want someone to get out there within a week to 2 weeks of when we get a deal under contract. But also to show, is this guy serious? Is he serious about earning my business? And serious looks like spending the time, the energy, and the effort to go out to the property and walk it and give you feedback. I don't like the way this lays. We should cut it up in this way. And a good broker will be able to tell you all that stuff.
Yeah, we actually, when I'm selecting a broker, we have a checklist in our company.
Ooh.
And we ask the same 10 questions, I think is. I haven't done it myself in a while. But yeah, those all fall on there. We also ask, actually going back to lands.com, that's kind of brilliant. I think you kind of glossed over it, but go to a property that broker has listed and submit a lead. and see how quickly they call you as a lead.
Yeah.
Um, and it's good also to submit one that would be a similar price point. Like some land brokers are listing $100,000 properties, but don't care about them, because they also have $1 million properties that they list because they're professionals and they do big ranches and things like that. So you may be listing $100,000 property with them, and that's a big deal for you because, maybe you bought it for 50 and that $50,000 is, an income. It's like a salary for you. A lot of people who are starting only have 2 or 3 deals at a time. That broker may see that as small potatoes. So you need to there's a lot of things there. You have to find someone who esteems your deal. And that's a good way to test it is how do they respond to a similarly priced listing and submitting a lead. But secondly, we always ask to see if they have a drone or a droner. That can save you a lot of time. Droning can be either a free service that someone provides you and maybe you hire someone to edit it. Or it can be something that you have to pay, $1,000 to get somebody out there or whatever. I've paid a lot for droning depending on how far out they have to go. And then I think it's also a good idea to have kind of a review of their marketing material itself. A lot of people are just going to copy and paste from other. I've seen this. I've seen somebody who listed my property in the past had just copy and pasted something from a similar property, and the facts inside of it weren't even correct. So it's like somebody treated that, and it was a small listing. It was like 30 grand or something like that, but they had so little care for that. Clearly my business didn't matter to them. So yeah, there's probably 100 different ways that you could vet them. But yeah, the biggest and most important ones in my book are, do they have their own marketing platform access? Do they have land watch, land flip, whatever? Do they respond to leads? Do they do good marketing? Do they have a drone or access to a drone? And yes, the last one and probably the most vital in our market is, are they willing to go to the property? If you can go to have them out to the property before you buy it, that's incredible. But also if they're willing to do showings, a lot of agents won't do showings. They'll send somebody out there and they'll create a silly map or something like that. And they'll try to, and sometimes that works, but sometimes it really doesn't. Sometimes you have a stinker property or a fully wooded property or something like that. So yeah, that's a big deal. Those are all the ones that are on kind of my checklist, that match up with yours.
Yeah, I think that you added some really good points there. But the important thing is all the things that you said and I said indicates that the person cares about the listing. And if they're responsive, they show that how they do one thing, marketing materials, is how they do everything. I find that
Right.
that's so true. Even if it's a $50,000 property, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah, and if you want to go really high level, some of the best agents and brokers will do Facebook Marketplace listings as
Yep.
well with your property. And that's incredible because that's something that, I don't know, people have talked about how they've outsourced it. I don't know how the hell you outsource that without getting your account corrupted or whatever. But if you have a broker with a real, valid, high quality land account who's, incentivized to answer all these "is it still available" messages, that's incredible. That is a huge value. And actually, in exchange, I've taken some of our best practices and shared them with brokers in the past if they're willing to do that for us, because they get the commission too. So if I can tell them how to sell on Facebook, that's a big deal.
What are some of your top tips for selling on Facebook? Because I find that I don't know if I necessarily trust a broker, in my opinion, to field a inquiry as quickly as we do, right? And
Yeah,
so
they won't. So brokers, I advise brokers to do it differently. So for myself, I focus on trying to find the group that isn't being spoken to, where you can get a lot of attention. So I do a lot of group testing. I actually have a list of Facebook groups in Texas that are very responsive and have an engaged community. So like this, whatever one I was in yesterday was Temple, Texas, buy, sell, trade. It's just like a million other buy, sell groups. But every time I post in there, I get 50 comments, people fighting with each other, all sorts of great stuff. And it boosts, like the way algorithm works is the more engagement you get anywhere on Facebook, the more you appear everywhere on Facebook.
Yep.
So even though they're fighting in this buy sell group in Temple, Texas, somewhere else you could be ranking higher just because it came from the same hands. So the way I approach things would be a little different. But the way that I tell a broker to do it is they won't respond to "is it available?" all day, maybe. Like maybe they're old timers who don't want to do that. But I bet they would respond to somebody who, like what we'll do is say, read all the details, make sure all the details are in there from the location to the price point to the restrictions to all yada yada. And then at the bottom, it'll say message me Apple in all caps to show me that you've read everything. So that you kind of insert a self vetting process for a broker who would be too lazy to respond. So he'll only respond to people who say Apple or something like that. But then it's at least somebody who's digested all the information and is still interested. But yeah, being strategic about buy sell groups, making sure they know what buy sell groups are. I don't know. It's kind of a long list, but I should probably do a video that's just best practices on Facebook. There's so many. I did a live stream with AJ, Alicia Jarrett, and her crew over at Supercharged Offers, and I started talking. I realized like how many things I do that I don't know, maybe people don't think about, like efficiencies. Like I use notes on my phone if I'm selling a property to have like links, copy, like specific things that I can copy and paste quickly into messages, so I'm not sitting there looking all the time. That makes me just real efficient in it. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I could go on that for a long time, but Facebook's still where we sell most of our land.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's bring it back to where you were starting, which was you had, you were kind of spinning down a coaching business. Tell us what was going on there.
Yeah. So, it's a business, man.
Yeah.
You know, and I really care about if I do something, I want to do it well. And if you have two masters, it's very hard to do them well. It's very, very hard, especially because coaching beginners is different than coaching experts.
Yeah.
You and I were talking about this like in December, right? We got together, and
Yeah,
it's a
something
very
like that.
different, type of conversation because a beginner is always, they're asking a lot of questions. Imagine like a child that's learning something new. And I'm not saying that a beginner is a child, but I'm just giving the analogy of this person's new to this whole industry. And so they don't know so many things, the title things. A lot of times they don't even know about real estate. They don't understand wetlands or floodplains or talking to brokers, everything that they ask questions about. Versus if you're working with, you and me talking together, it's very different, right? I might learn things from you, but the way that we interact is very different than if I was a beginner and you were, for example, someone that's taking me through a coaching program, right? It's not good or bad. It's just not, it takes a lot of energy. And if I'm going to allocate that energy to something, I want to do it well. And so I spun down the program because I'm sort of like, there was a bunch of people that joined it. And I was finding that I was not able to be as on top of it as I wanted to because I have a business. And so the business is the income generator. And so I spun it down because I said there's other people, like there's so much information. I even talk about it on social media all the time. This podcast is a great example. Like you can learn a lot of the basics on podcasts. You don't really need the course at the beginning. You might find a course helpful or YouTube videos helpful, but you can get started. Really, the dearth in the market is more higher level conversations like this, which you can get through working with an agency, working with someone one-on-one, finding a good funding partner.
Yep.
I found in my first year, man, like a lot of most of my deals were just with a funding partner, and I learned so much from her because she just knew the business. Like she helped me walk through 2 big subdivisions. She helped me with just asking the right questions with brokers. And so a lot of times you can get that experience and that knowledge through working with those people. And so you don't really need the beginners thing. And so it was a combination of both of that. The market didn't really need it, even though, of course, it was a great course. But also, I can't serve 2 masters. I have a family. I have a 9-month-old kid. I want to be present with my family. And so at this point, because I'm growing my business so much or focusing on growing my business so much, I couldn't do it both.
Yeah, we talked about this, and I 100% agree. And maybe I've talked about it here before. I'm not sure, but there's kind of a inherent, what do you call that? There's like an inherent contradiction with coaching, where unless you're educating so generically, it's not going to be applicable to everybody. But as soon as you boil down something as complicated as what we do to make it generic, it's almost no longer helpful. to anybody, or they walk away from the education feeling very knowledgeable, but actually lacking in so many detailed areas that, um, if you are like somebody who's kind of assuming that, like, oh, I don't know everything, but I'm still willing to go make mistakes and push and try really hard, like, you will be able to take that information and overcome. But again, if you're that sort of person, you probably don't really need an education. You can probably go find a lot of that stuff on your own. So yeah, it just makes it really messy. And then, we'd also talked about this. I found that because I've done some sort of, I've told you I've done one-off coaching. I've never like done a program or something. I am hosting my first seminar though, which is interesting here in February, a 4-hour live event in Arlington. But the goal when you're training somebody is to make them make progress, right? Like if you're sitting there, you want to see them make an acquisition, but you can tell them everything, but it all depends on them. And I've educated people who are great at doing everything but couldn't do phone calls. And because of that, they couldn't land a deal. They were awkward and stilted and didn't know how to make an offer seem like palatable. So it's like there's almost nothing I can do. I mean, I've taught them like how to have conversations, but they don't do it well. So their deals aren't working. And it's like after you see enough people flame out doing the exact same thing you do in your own business, then, you feel like maybe this is a bigger challenge than I thought it would be, or maybe I'm not going to see the fruit from this that I really hoped I would see. Because the idea is cool. Like I want to build a little army of investors behind me that are feeding me deals and whatever else. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's a big challenge there. So what are you doing instead?
Well, I mean, I'm primarily focusing on my business. Have done like some. I get reached out to like you do, right? A lot about, hey, could you help me? And so I have a pretty strict criteria of people that I work with. You have to have experience. You have to have a profitable business, a big enough business. And so I do some private coaching, but I max out at 8 people a month, and I'm basically at 7 out of 8 people, right? And I do that. That's it's actually quite fun when you have people that are, one of my clients is like making 750K, right? And he's like, hey, how do I build a bigger business, right? How do I remove constraints and bottlenecks and challenges? And those conversations are actually really fun because I like to dig into those types of things. And so that's the only thing I'm doing with kind of private coaching. I was even doing that before, like just on Twitter, like meeting with people on Twitter. And years ago when I got started in land investing and connecting with people, and that's the way I met Justin Pichet, my co-host, right? Like I met with him, and he's about a year and a half ahead of me, for my podcast with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I just
And
reached
what's
out to
that
him.
podcast called?
The Ground Game Podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, the Ground Game Podcast. And he's super, like, very, very impressive, and has had the experience, and so I kind of reached out to him, and he gave me some private coaching is not the right word. Like I just basically berated him until he would get on a call with me, and then we talked about land, and he was very kind. We got on a couple of calls, like once a month or once every other month, pretty casually, and we just talked about our businesses. And that was super enjoyable. And I know he gets a lot of benefit. I know he does private coaching too. He's full at the moment. He told me the other day, but he does private coaching as well. And I think he does it because he likes to do it as well. But I mean, the business is the main thing, right? It's all consuming. It really is. And it's hard to kind of focus between two things. So I do the private coaching, which is bi-weekly, right? An hour and a half with someone, sitting down, connecting with them, helping them remove bottlenecks. But other than that, it's all steam ahead in the business.
Yeah, I agree. I think the idea that you can completely delegate this business affordably, I think, is just a myth. I know very few people who have delegated to the point where they're not like, working mostly a full day in the business. Um, it's below a handful. So yeah, I think you're right. It's either you're a coach or an investor, or you have like a very strict separation. So like when I had any sort of student, I'd have a 1 hour call a week, and they were allowed to kind of text me one-off things throughout the week. That's it. That's all I had. Um, and if you don't have those sort of restrictions around it or timeline, it's like they just eats your day up, you know. And then there's also this emotional bandwidth. I'm definitely a feeler. I'm kind of a softie, so I would also break my boundaries all the time. I'd be like, "No, okay, yeah, I'm busy right. I'll take your call," you know, and I'd walk away from what I was doing or stop what I was working on to go fix their problem or help them with a deal or whatever. Um, so yeah, well, that's really cool. You know, 8 students. I think that's very manageable. That's like what, a call a week or a call every other week, something like
Yeah,
that.
so I basically do 4 calls on Friday afternoons for like an hour and a half. And then in between, I'm available via email. I'm available by, I do take calls because I honestly love talking about land and it work a lot. So um, I'm happy to talk about a deal or talk about a hire to really help because usually the conversations really go into like it's no longer about like how do I do this. It's more like, hey, I need help on how like who do I hire next? How do I get better funding partners? How do I structure my business in this way to hit my revenue goals? What KPI should I track? It's no longer like how do I do market selection? It's really that next level of conversation. And so I love to talk about it too because I still learn. Like I'm constantly learning. As you teach, you really learn. I know
Hmm.
you've been doing that thing on Facebook,
Hmm.
the AI thing on
Yep.
Facebook,
Yep.
and you're teaching people, but you're also really learning. And so it is a reinforcing thing that I get a lot out of the coaching, like spiritually fulfillment wise, with the people that I work with. I have really deep relationships with them. And also I learn a lot, right? I'm reminded like, oh, this is why we do this thing. This is super important, right? And so I really get benefit out of that.
Yeah, and I think probably a huge benefit as well is, you know, I'm bad at mirrors. You know, I'll look at someone else and I'll be able to say like, obviously you shouldn't take that deal. You know, that's a bad deal. And then I'll look at my portfolio and I'll be like, I'm about to do the same mistake. Or, um, but the most obvious in our industry is like the shiny object. You know, somebody launched a new course. Somebody said I should be doing this. There's this new market. There's this entitlement. There's this whatever thing. Let me pivot my entire business and go chase it. Um, and I think a lot of, you know, what folks are doing wrong right now is just always moving on, you know, never settling down, whether it's a region or a property type or, you know, whatever it might be. Now, if you have such a business where you can expand into a new concept or you know how to build a business that scaffolds, like, all right, I'm going to take the team I have and I'm going to give this person a little more responsibility. You can like strategically grow into something. That's one thing. But what I think a lot of people do is like chase the shiny object. You know, so when you're in a coaching position, it's really obvious when somebody's doing that. You can ask them like, okay, what's driving business today? And they'll be like, well, I don't know. I haven't done any sort of acquisitions or I haven't really bought anything recently, but I heard about this program. I'm going to do this educational course or,
Yep.
um, and
Yep.
it's really obvious from the outside.
I
Um,
had a consult I had a call some I was referred to um by another client. He's like, hey, you got to work with Clay. I got on a call with this guy, and he was talented, very well spoken, very charismatic. And I was asking him about his business, and he's like, hey, I have this structure, this structure, this structure. I'm like, okay, so how many deals are you doing? Whatever. And Logan, what I see a lot of people do is they scale out of their business and they're like not even making 40K a month. I'm like, dude, you can't scale out of a 30K a month business. Like there's no 20K a month. You're not scaling. And people hire prematurely. And so I've gotten from the like when I was coaching, right, doing the accelerator. I was like, you can really do this if you are analytical, and you might not be shy on the phones, but you can make it happen. And two, like if you want to build this business from the ground up, you have to get on the phones because that is the most dollar productive activity you can do. And so people want to hire an acquisition manager from the Philippines and pay them $7 an hour and expect that person to produce the same results that an American would. And there's just no way. I have an incredible acquisition manager, and I still have to be on him all the time, slacking off, not putting the notes in the CRM, um, you know, you know, calling the people back,
Texting
um,
instead of calling. Yeah.
all the things that are you're supposed to do, getting on them as a sales manager is critical. And this guy's talented. He's charismatic. He has years of sales experience. He's very impressive, except he's still a human being. And so that's one thing that I would say, going back, it's like sit in the acquisition seat as long as you possibly can. As long as you possibly can. Because one of the things that we deal with, and I talk to people about this all the time on Twitter, on social media, is the principal agent problem. Now, this is the biggest problem that we have to deal with in our business, in land business. And the reason why people don't scale is because of this problem, which is, Julius Caesar once said, if you want it done, go. If you don't, send. Right? That's paraphrasing what he said. But essentially, it is, if you want something done right, you should do it yourself. You hear all these internet gurus saying, well, you can, hire these VAs. By the way, they're the ones that own the companies that are selling the VAs, by the way. You can hire all these VAs and they can run and scale your business. I hate to break it to you, man. The buck stops with you as a CEO. And so the principal agent problem is no one is going to work as hard, be as dedicated, be as focused as you are as the principal of the company. Agents, the people that you hire, the sales guy I was talking about, my lead managers, my cold, whatever, all those people may work hard. And it's about creating a culture and incentive structure that creates an environment of high performance. But they will never be as dedicated as you. You will take a call at 10:30 at night to close a deal because the walls are closing around you. You got to get payroll. You'll close that deal, right? But other people will say, well, I can just get another job, right? And that's where, taken to the extreme, that's a principal agent problem. And so here's where I think most land investors fall down. Why there's not more people doing multiple seven figures. I can probably I can count on my hand. Now, I don't know everyone in this space. I'm going to be fair. But I can probably count on my hand the people that have done seven figures in this business that are like outspoken about it, that talk about it. Very few people ever eclipse that. And I think it's because they're running businesses with skeleton crews of VAs that they've hired. They haven't trained properly. They hired prematurely. They're bloat because they need these people to continue to have their business run, right? Their deals are taking longer to sell. And so they're trying to hold on because they're like, I need to scale to go into this different shiny objects that I'm going to go after because I need to go after rural subdivides and I'm not doing the flipping right. And so they have a bloated business. Their people aren't as competent as they could be because they, as a leader, have not trained them, have not upskilled them, have not set the right expectation, have not built the culture. And they're not closing deals, and the market is against them. Like we were talking about at the beginning of this call. And before this, the market is slower. And so people are running a playbook that is setting themselves up for failure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair breakdown of what's happening. And unfortunately, where I think a lot of the strife comes from was just too many gurus. Too many gurus all popped up and just sold a ton of courses. And there's nothing wrong with really educating more people into the space. I really appreciate people who do that. It's the misleading, I guess, expectations that they're establishing for how things are going to go once you step out of the guru education and into the real world. So, well, cool. What else do you got? I guess we're getting close to the top of the hour here. Do you have anything that you wanted to cover specifically?
No, I mean, I would just echo the thing that I was talking about earlier, right? To leave the listeners with something of value, right? Most of the things that we do are not actually getting us closer to profitability in our business, right? And not only do you have to look at that, but you also have to look at the people that you're listening to on social media, including me, and ask yourself, why is this person going out there and talking about land? Like, what are their intentions? Why are they going out there and why are they talking about cold calling or texting or direct mail or PPC? Like, what's the reason behind what they're doing? And then you analyze your own self and say, what are the things that I'm doing? What's the reason behind what I'm doing? Am I avoiding calling this seller back because I don't like I'm not comfortable with it? Well, business is very uncomfortable, right? It's like very uncomfortable. And so do you want to be stressed about um, payroll, or do you want to be stressed about having the conversation with the seller? And so sometimes we got to pick both those discomforts. So those two things, and figuring out the guru's intention, the other people's intention, the reason why people are on social media. Why are people talking about this thing? Why are they saying it's the greatest thing since sliced bread? And then number two, looking at yourself and saying, am I doing the activities that actually produce revenue? Calling sellers back, finding good markets, connecting with funding partners, working with finding the best brokers, staying on top of those brokers. Those four things are like everything in this business. If you can find the right deals, if you can get them under contract at a good price, if you can get them funded at a good number, and you can find the right broker, then your business problems are solved. Unfortunately, that's a moving target, and it's very difficult to get all those things right. But that's what you can focus on, the 20% of things that yield 80% of results.
Yeah, and I think the hardest thing is just like self mastery. That's always been the most difficult thing for me. If there's like, I'm a highly productive person. I'm not bragging. That's just the reality. I do a lot. And with having three kids, 10 and under, it's like very busy. But I would not consider myself even close to mastering myself. Like I'm still constantly like, screwing around. Like I have this solitaire game on my phone. I'll just disappear somewhere for 20 minutes and come out like all, I don't know what the hell I was doing for 20 minutes. So it's if people struggle that much to just kind of do the basic things, go to the gym, brush their teeth, like owning and operating and managing your own business will be an even bigger challenge for you because the emotions are much higher. Like there's the things that cause the most stress and frustration, not only for an individual, but in a household, relationships and money. And in this industry, it's both. If you're not managing relationships well, you're going to have a hard time. If you're not managing money well, you're going to have a hard time. And, like you said, you got to choose your hard, whether it's going to be picking up the phone or not picking up your phone. So yeah, a lot of self-mastery stuff goes into that. That's a lot of what I've been focusing on the past couple of years is like increasing discipline. I just bought another book. I should have had it here, but held it up. Another discipline book. Well, cool.
What's one thing that you've found to be the biggest breakthrough for yourself in self-mastery?
Well, this just in 2020, I'll just say my recent one in 2025 is mastering my sleep.
Ooh.
I had a ton of bad habits because I always struggled with sleep. I had this like thing in my head from a young age where I was like, it's hard for me to sleep. I can't, my mind always lights up. I have so many things that go on during the day that when I lay down at night, I'll never be able to go to sleep. And this year, and that's also when I would like snack, so I'd eat bad, I'd be gaining weight, or I would like, watch YouTube for 3 hours and just completely zone. Like I'd just do crazy stuff because I was not going to sleep. And then I wake up early and take care of my kids, but I was like a zombie doing it's like everything. It affects every aspect of my life. And I always had this like idea that I just couldn't sleep well until this year. My big goal was like, okay, I'm going to master sleep. So I'm just going to be really intentional about when I wake up, what I'm eating, when I'm eating, when I turn my screen off, when I turn the lights down in the house, like everything, what I'm reading before I go to sleep, not getting up after a certain time. Like that used to be the thing. My wife would fall asleep. I'd feel like I was bothering her. So I'd get up and go sit on the sofa. Well, now I don't get up after 9 o'clock unless something happens. I'm in bed. So I either get to read or I go to sleep because I can't be on my phone anymore. Done. All my sleep problems gone. Like the amount of time I was spending on screens dropped dramatically. Brain fog lifted. I feel much better. It's like I don't know. I'm 34, and it took me 34 years to figure out that sleep's a really important thing. Even though you hear it all the time, I don't.
Right.
But I didn't take it seriously, or I just thought it was something that was out of my control. And I found that I have limited attention, so I can't fix everything in a year, but I can pick like two or three things to fix every year. And I've pretty much been doing that the past 4 or 5 years, and life's improved a lot. So yeah, sleep, huge. Apparently, everybody says it, but I didn't believe it, I guess. I don't know. Now I know.
In the next podcast episode, we're just gonna record us sleeping.
That's right. Yeah.
This is Logan's night routine.
This is
how
violent.
it goes down.
This is violent snoring coming at you. All right, cool, Clay. Well, do you want to plug anything? I guess your podcast, right? The Ground Game podcast.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, dude, I'm on social media, right? And I talk about what I talk about on social media. So if you're interested, I'm on Twitter, very big Twitter guy, right? X, sorry. Clay Hepler on X, Clay Hepler on Instagram, and Ground Game Podcast. Justin P. Shea, my co-host, and I are talking about land, talking about dirt, and it's just us two talking about specific topics pertinent for business growth, scaling. It's tailored towards someone that already has an existing business and getting the business to the next level, not necessarily a beginning, even though beginners can get benefit from it. So if you're interested in that, I talk about what I do, my businesses and everything on social media. So that's all. That's it.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for being with us today, folks. If you need to buy or sell land, primelandexchange.com is the place to go. If you've not subscribed to this podcast and you're hearing it for the first time, hit subscribe. Muy importante. What else? If you need deal funding, go to landpartnerfunding.com. If you want to talk to me, thelandfixer@gmail.com, or social medias or wherever else you want to find me. Clay, I guess in 6 months we'll talk again.
Good deal, dude. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.